we're about to start this story with a paranormal update of mine because what? Let me introduce myself first. I'm Morgan. Nice to meet you. Here we do a little bit of all things creepy. This month we're doing nothing but telling stories that you guys have sent in to me. So, with that being said, send me in your stories. I will have more information in the description below, along with podcast episode links and other social media links. But let me tell you guys what just happened. So, I mixed up stories this week. I thought, I'll get there. I had picked stories for each day, and I have them all saved on my device. Okay, um, so I was like, I'm gonna have to shove one of the days off to next week because I had something creepy happen to me yesterday, and I wanted to tell the story. Tell me why I went just now. So I'm on my last story for this is like you're watching this on Sunday. I go to move the last day. Look at this. I never filled in that last, but the one after that, perfectly aligned for me to tell that story. That, by the way, I made these scripts like a week ago. I'm scared. But, anyways, let's get into these stories. I just wanted to tell you guys that because what? I was recently talking with my brother about things that happened to us growing up for the first time in depth as adults, ahead of spending a few hours ghost hunting at Hillview Manor in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. The first memories we have of paranormal activity started when we were around 5 and 7. We moved around quite a lot as kids, but at this time we were living in South Carolina, in a very rural location. I remember my mom and bio dad arguing about activity happening in our house, but much more notable was the house down the road. They babysat us often, and my brother remembers waking up from naps to them putting cameras out and freaking out about everything. My first ever apparition sighting was as we were walking to their house and I saw someone in the attic window. I just felt such dread and didn't want to go into the house. Things got so bad they ended up moving into our basement. Well, fast forward many years later, and we now live in Pennsylvania, still very rural. We are now 10 and 12, and it's a big yellow split level house with 3 levels. This house was so haunted, even my mother doesn't deny it now. Our friends hated sleeping over. The activity was concentrated to my brother's room on the lower level and the bathroom on the top level. My brother saw a girl in the mirror behind him in that bathroom, and I saw the top half of a man wearing green, almost velour like suit, staring at me while I took a bath. We didn't talk about those apparitions with each other until long after we'd moved out. We used to have a rather large rock collection kept in styrofoam cups for some reason. Well, we came home one day and the foam cups were shredded and covered my brother's entire room. My mom blamed the dogs, but we could sense her fear, and I remember distinctly looking down at the dogs locked in their kennel. Another time, I had a friend sleeping over in my room on the upper level next to my bathroom. We were sleeping on opposite ends of the bed, feet ahead. We just settled down from talking, and we were almost asleep when my room was suddenly full of different colored orbs. There were probably 5 to 10 of them. We watched for a minute before my friend nervously asked what was happening. I was almost used to the stuff at this point, so I lied and told her it was headlights, even though it clearly was not, and the only thing across the street were cows. I hid under the covers until I fell asleep. As I said, our friends hated sleeping over because every time they did, they had a nightmare. Every kid had the same nightmare, almost every time they slept over. I only had it once, but my brother had got it often. They would see someone, usually a girl, telling them to get out, and then they'd wake up and see blood on their hands. Activity was always worse during storms, and I don't remember specifically what had happened, but I remember one night there was a particularly bad storm. My mom made us all come to her room to sleep. All I can remember is sheer terror, and none of us slept. Her room was on the other side of the upper floor, so it had nothing to do with the danger of the storm. We also lived in the South and experienced terrible tornadoes, and my mom knew the signs and what to do. Something seriously scared her that night, enough that she scared her kids with her fear. My mother's husband was mistreating us, and I finally told her. And the second she did, I never saw that man again. We moved back in with my grandparents down the street, and I do wonder if some of the activity in that house was fueled by what was happening to us. The yellow house was on quite a bit of land and set back. We ended up splitting that land, and we had a house built for us on the front by a local charity and sold the house. The new house was mostly quiet, but we did have some experiences there. Both my sisters, 10 years younger, and I have heard a woman's voice when no one else was home. I had had cabinets slam in my face twice. My brother had one experience. It was again a stormy night, and we were home alone with his then girlfriend in my room in the basement. We were young adults at this point, and they both heard something walking around upstairs back and forth along the hallway. It was so distinct and clear that they were sure someone was in the house. They called my grandfather, who rushed from his house down the road, literally 2 houses down, with protection. He didn't find a thing, and the doors and windows were all locked. When new neighbors moved into the yellow house, they were kind and friendly. Within a year, they were some of the most miserable people that did nothing but antagonize us until they moved out not too long ago. I'll end on a super sweet story, though, to lighten the mood. We lived in the yellow house when our great grandfather passed away, and he was a super sweet old man that loved to hand out half sticks of spearmint gum and was always in his chair passing the time with his iconic bird whistles. The night of his funeral, we were both in the top bunk of the bed talking about our memories of him. We were again probably 10 and 12. Just as we kind of had a long conversation, we both smelled that spearmint gum and heard bird call whistles clear as day. We fell asleep listening to them, and we didn't talk about this until a few days ago, at 29 and 31. We both remember it the exact same way. And at the beginning of that, they mentioned that they were doing an investigation at Hillview Manor, and they sent an update on that. The investigation at Hillview Manor was amazing. You should absolutely look up the history of this place. One set of owners were extremely mean and cruel, and they had an apartment on one of the floors of the building. Well, as soon as we stepped on that floor, my head started pounding, and it stopped as soon as we left. When we went back, the same thing happened. In another area known for an entity whistling, we used a spirit box to capture 4 to 5 seconds of uninterrupted whistling. After that, the box went haywire, screeching at full volume no matter what we did. It did only behave that way in one area, a bathroom where a man supposedly himself, but others say it was intentional. Someone did that to him. In the basement, in a boiler room, there was an almost shrine to a man named George, full of Steelers memorabilia. George was a resident that adored the football team. We weren't getting much using the spirit box, so my brother said, "We are going to leave here soon," to which the box replies, "You can go," about the 14-second mark in the video. My sister-in-law says bye George, and the EMF reader, which was previously full and staying full, dropped to nothing in a few seconds. I also caught a wispy something in a photo. I attached that photo along with some of the others showing just how creepy this place is. I'd love to send that video if you can let me know the best way from my phone. Okay, yes. I'll respond to that email, and I'll probably attach it into another story. But you can, if you put it into a Google Drive and invite me to the link, I can get it that way. I would love to see it and post it. Alright, next story. So I grew up in southeastern Pennsylvania, one of the few non-Appalachian areas, so I didn't grow up with the warnings. I did, however, grow up in an extremely haunted house, poltergeist level, so the paranormal is not new to me, but that's a different story. About a year ago, I moved to central Pennsylvania, right into a valley between 2 mountains. Thankfully, I live in a small little town, so I'm not completely isolated, but we live in the back of that town closer to the mountains. There is one row of houses behind us, and then the forest. We had some freaky incidents while walking my dog Asher late one night, and when I mean late, I mean the witching hour late. One particular incident still makes me nervous walking him by myself, though. We don't have a fence, so I'll walk my dog into the far end of our backyard, where there's an alley driveway in the back, and then right across from our backyard is the dilapidated abandoned cabin and some trees. On either side of that are regular houses. During the day, it looks quite normal for a rundown coal mining town. At night, the trees in the area make it pitch black. My dog can be a little difficult. He's very particular when using the bathroom, so at first I didn't notice anything different with him. I had my flashlight on while scrolling through TikTok, and I look up and my dog is dead still, standing in a defensive position staring into the woods. My dog is rarely the quiet type, as he gets overly excited, so this was unnerving. I try to get his attention at first, so he goes back to using the bathroom, but eventually I point my flashlight to where he's looking. All I see is the reflection of bright blue eyes. Nothing else, no body shape, no stance, nothing. My light falls to illuminate the pitch black, and all I see are the eyes staring back at me. It was not big enough to be a deer, from how far its eyes were from the ground. It was also too big to be a very normal stray cat or a lost dog. Not to mention the eyes felt too human. I froze for a hot second looking at my dog, who was still intently staring at the floating eyes only a few feet from us. I just remember telling myself to not freak out and to try to stay calm. I got my dog's attention non-verbally, scared of accidentally inviting something into my home other than my pup, and hightailed it to my door. It's been months, but I still ask my fiancé or mother to walk my dog with me late at night. I haven't seen it again and truly hope I never do. Ugh. Alright, next story. I'm a big fan of your videos, and honestly you make me want to start recording my own stories and accounts, but I wanted to email you a few that you can do with what you will. You should. I'm also excited to hear your thoughts and your takes. So this first story isn't something that was experienced by me directly, however it was experienced by my maternal grandmother who raised me, so here's that backstory. When I was around 5 years old, my mother passed away in a car accident. She was only 22 years old at the time, so it was very hard on my entire family, especially me. I don't remember a lot about my childhood, but that is the one night that I remember every detail of. A few months after my mother passed away, my grandmother happened to look out into our living room window and swears to this day that she saw her standing outside. She saw her looking in and smiling at me, who was asleep on the couch. According to her, my mother told me that she loved me, and out of sleep I replied, "I love you too, Mommy," before she vanished. The next story happened to me in high school and was the only time that I'd ever experienced sleep paralysis. I want to preface this by saying that not much scares me. I love all things spooky and horror related. I'm a Wiccan, so I'm used to dealing with and communicating with spirits and entities. However, there is one thing in the world that makes my heart drop, and that is a depiction of a woman with long hair and a white gown. Dude, me too. It is so cliche and overused, but to this day that terrifies me more than anything else. So one night when I'm asleep, I woke up, but I wasn't really awake. In front of me, to my horror, stood that exact depiction of my biggest fear, and she was looking right at me. I couldn't move. Honestly, even if I could, I don't think I would have wanted to, because I thought it was best to not make any sudden movements. In a matter of seconds, this thing leapt onto me and began choking me. The next day, I told my friend, and she said that I had marks on my neck. This friend was the one who got me to really practice Wiccan, though my whole family on both sides have a history with the craft. She taught me about communicating with spirits, and she had mentioned to me that the image that I saw that night is exactly what she'd seen just in my shadow, following me around every day. I don't know if I would have fully believed it if my dad hadn't said the exact same thing. I think it has something to do with what my parents decided to do in that apartment we lived in when I was a baby. I'm not exactly sure what happened. All I know is it was a Ouija board gone wrong kind of situation. Finally, this one is the most recent one, and it was one of those situations where if you hear a voice, no, you didn't. Okay, first, let me talk about that. So, it definitely could have been from the Ouija board. I think something definitely got invited in, but it's so... Okay, here's the thing with spirits. They can, or entities, normally they can present themselves how they want, and sometimes they just choose the scariest depictions they can. Like, that thing definitely saw you watching The Ring and, like, watched your reaction and was like... I'm gonna do that. Like, stop. Anyways, it was early morning, probably around 4 a.m., and I woke up to go get a drink of water. My room is only a few seconds from the living room that leads into the kitchen, luckily. After I grabbed my bottle of water and turned off the light to walk back to my room, I heard a whisper in the left of my ear saying, "Turn around." It was a woman's voice that I did not recognize. I knew it wasn't my grandmother. She's the only other woman in the house. Immediately I freeze, goosebumps all over my skin. I took a deep breath and calmly but quickly walked to my room, closed my eyes, and shut the door. I'm eager to hear what you have to say, and if you've experienced anything similar. I also hope you have a lovely day. Yeah. It sounds like you're just experiencing a lot of things because you're really open to it. I'm sure you have, but set up protections on yourself if you haven't, and do regular cleansings. Make sure, come on. Well, if you're going to come over here, just make sure to keep up with the cleansings and protections and things like that, because you're probably going to have some occurrences. Alright, next story. I was around 8 when it started. I had a sleep paralysis and I only saw a shadowy figure pass across my room, but I could move. I told my grandparents, but they told me to go back to bed. I think it happened when I was around 10 or something, and it was 3 to 4 in the morning. I was getting a snack from my kitchen and I heard an old lady whisper in my ear my name. Obviously I was scared, so I bolted back to my room. It was the last thing I heard of her, but I hear cracking at night and lights flicker a bit from 3 to 4 in the morning. I don't know if it's her, but sometimes I see a shadow figure from the kitchen of my home. I'm so very paranoid of my kitchen now. I don't blame you. I would do a little bit of a cleansing if you're open to that because, oof. Alright, next story. I've experienced a lot of paranormal stuff throughout my life, but the most intense stuff happened at my childhood home. It started when we were moving in, and I was around 4 years old. While my parents and older sister were carrying boxes inside, my parents left me in the living room. I was playing with a bouncy ball, instructing me to stay in that room. However, my bouncy ball began bouncing up the stairs, and I hurried after it. The staircase had walls on both sides, and the bottom steps curved around so you couldn't see the rest of the staircase without stepping up on those first steps. After a few moments, my parents panicked when they no longer saw me in the living room. When they called out for me, I came calmly downstairs, and they were calmly telling them that there was a boy wrapped in bandages that was just floating above the stairs as though suspended by something, their outstretched hand cradling a ball. I told them that the boy seemed sad and lonely, and so I thought he wanted to play. Being so young, I wasn't afraid, just curious. My parents later found out that before being converted into a rental home, the building was a 2-story recreational center that had more than its fair share of tragedies. Most notably, a young boy unaliving himself in the main game room upstairs. In Texas, landlords or sellers are strongly encouraged but not legally required to disclose deaths that occur in the home. But my parents loved that house and didn't hold it against our landlord that he didn't tell us right off the bat. Stuff continued to happen in that house for the entirety of our time there. TVs would turn on in the middle of the night on full volume with nothing but static. The sounds of someone walking around upstairs when no one was there, electric keyboards playing a few keys off while unplugged entirely, etc. When friends would spend the night, they would have terrifying experiences as well. Everyone in the neighborhood was terrified of our house, and we never ever got trick-or-treaters because no one wanted to step foot near it. As if that wasn't all creepy enough, it didn't end with us. We moved out when I turned 15, and I had trouble coping and always missed my childhood home city and friends. So on mine and my husband's first anniversary, my husband drove me the 5 hours back home. We decided to see who was living there and ask if we could show my husband around. When we arrived, the couple who had been living there was in the process of moving out, and they allowed us to look around both inside and outside. They weren't concerned since most of their stuff was already out and they were just grabbing the last remaining boxes. As they were passing by us while we looked, they overheard my husband say, "So this is the house you said was haunted, right?" The couple stopped dead in their tracks and literally dropped the boxes they were carrying. After a moment, the woman asked, "Did you just say haunted?" Turns out they had experienced many of the exact same things my family did, but they were constantly trying to convince themselves that it was nothing. Needless to say, I don't think they believed it was nothing after that day. I have so many other stories that I could share if you're interested, but this one tends to be the one people find the most intriguing. When we moved away from that home, my family and I ended up in a house resting on a well-known resting place of many indigenous people due to fighting between the white and indigenous people long ago. I'm in Texas, close to the Texas-Oklahoma border. When I moved out of my parents' home, I ended up in a house where a unalive self-life-taking happened. We were in a rush to find affordable housing, and that was our only option. We've since moved out, but something seems to have followed us from that house. Like I said, tons of other stories I could tell. Thanks, and I hope you found my story interesting and that fellow followers find it interesting, and if you decide to share. I absolutely love your content. Also, if you ever need a website app or anything else, please feel free to let me know. I'm a recent software engineering grad, and I'm open to doing some free projects to add to my portfolio. Perhaps. Perhaps I would be interested in that. And yes, please send me the rest of your stories. Those were wild. The people just dropping their boxes. Oh my god, can you imagine how validating that was for them to hear? I can't even imagine. Well, anyways, that is all for today. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me, and I will see you tomorrow.